Welcome back to the Do Brand You channel. This is the In Conversation with podcast, and it is my pleasure to be welcoming Omar here today. Welcome, Omar, here.
Thank you for inviting me, Laura.
Yeah, so it's great, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. I ask everybody to tell me how can I introduce you, and I was wondering, how do I introduce you? I think we met many years ago. Either maybe in Dubai or in Oman, I'm not sure. And we've stayed in touch throughout the years, and it's been quite a journey. And you've done so many different things, and you've moved from the Middle East here down to New Zealand. So changed jobs, all these things. But I really liked what you said in explaining who you are, and that you are somebody that lives with a purpose to share knowledge with others, so that more people can live life with safety, stability, and security. I love that. I love how that's all part of how you're going to serve your fellow people. And you do that through your writing, your teaching, and your consulting. So I really want to get into a conversation I had with you the last time we were talking. And that was about you beginning to tell me about how you live intentionally. And if you could start that off with maybe how you have been doing that.
Well, first, let me say thank you for really bringing me on your show.
Yeah.
That means a lot, and thanks for this lovely introduction. We definitely go way back, and it's been a long time since we actually met in person. So I'm really happy we're having this conversation. Well, to me, living intentionally goes through phases that we define who we are, where we are, and where we need to be. And everyone is different. Everyone's journey is very different.
Yeah.
Mine certainly isn't any different than anyone else in that sense. So we have that unique track that we take, but it has to mean something to us. And to me, it starts with values and core values. So I've been a traveler for like 13 years of my life. So I've traveled quite a lot, and I was even born in a land that wasn't even my home. So that taught me quite early to, looking back, this is what I'm thinking today.
Yeah.
It was a strange to find home in that way. And with that being said, I was always on the quest of finding home within, but also in the world that we live in. And often than not, it would be not satisfying per se, quote unquote. And to that effect, it led me to look within and understand more of what are my values, what do I care for, and what matters to me. And like the Japanese would call it, the ikigai, which is what wakes you up in the morning, right? So
So you were born in Qatar, and you have citizenship there and in Egypt, or?
We had the opportunity of actually having citizenship in Qatar. I remember my parents didn't want to take that route, and we stayed with what we had, which I'm actually proud to be Egyptian, and that is something that means a lot to me too. Because at the end of the day, I feel like each and every land that we were born into, lived into for a while, forms a big part of who we are.
Yeah.
And it matters to acknowledge and honor that. But
so
yeah,
did you get to spend time then living in Egypt as well?
I did. Grew up in Egypt.
Okay.
We went back when I was 8 years old, and so we spent possibly all my teenage years until the age of 24, I think. And then from there, my travel journey started. And I worked so early in my life. I worked when I was 16. And so I've been working for like 17 plus years, or even more than that.
Yeah.
And that kind of shaped really who I am. in many ways, looking back at it now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting what you talk about because, yeah, so many people today are living, being raised in different countries, and they have citizenship, moving when they're younger. You say you move at 8, and how you had to look within. That's really interesting because you would have at a very early age been met with, distinct changes in maybe beliefs, thoughts, ideas, and that. So did your values, did you recall them changing, or did they kind of just solidify as you grew up?
I think my values were always there.
Yeah.
They just became a bit more stronger
Mm,
and more vivid, if you like,
yeah.
as I grew older.
Yeah.
I was able to look back and see the things that I used to do and why I used to do them,
Mm,
and how they fed my energy in some ways. It's
right.
interesting when we look at our values, because um, values have a lot to do with energy, and
Interesting.
there's a relationship, I think, between them in some ways. And what we do, um, in a lot of ways, how we are,
Yeah.
um, how we operate, how we show up, feeds our energy, and listening to that, um, helps define it. And so looking back, I found a lot of meaning in the way I was sharing information around, whether it's sharing knowledge, or is
Mm,
it's learning and growing, fine tuning,
yeah.
yeah.
That's really cool. Um, yeah. So when you were in Egypt and then you actually came then to New Zealand here, quite a change in culture and all of that. Because so many people do make these changes into different cultural spheres, did that did that really encourage you to go deep inside again, or did you feel like you were like floundering a bit? You
Oh,
know?
it did. It certainly did. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
quite strange land for me, being
Yeah.
here in New Zealand.
Yeah.
But I did come directly from Egypt. I mean,
Yeah. Mm,
just in relation to flight, and a place and time where I
yeah.
was before coming here. But I lived in Qatar for about 9 years, or close to 10 years.
Right.
So that was a different land, even that I was born in it. But
Yeah.
years after that, going there when I'm like 25, wasn't exactly how it was 25 years before that. So
Yeah.
that was another experience of its own.
Yeah.
But I think I always say this. I think life shapes itself in ways when we're ready.
Mm,
When we're
yeah.
ready. Like, I think if I had traveled to a completely foreign culture, foreign
Yeah.
land,
Mm,
when I was 25, it would have been completely different
mm,
experience. I
yeah.
perhaps would have broken up in pieces. Um, and but having lived on my own for that long
Yeah.
in a foreign land,
Mm,
solidified and certainly made me look deeper.
yeah. Yeah.
And I thought I had it all in my head until
Yeah.
I came to a new land with a completely different culture, which led me to look even deeper. And
Yeah.
I can say I've cracked it open. It's always a journey that we develop as we go along. So yeah.
Yeah. So as you've moved from, different places, which is interesting as well that you went back in your 20s to Qatar to a place that, because life changes, and when we go back to where we were, we find that it's changed, and then you coming here, there's so many people that can relate to this. Are there like some strategies or things that you do that allow you to somehow show up as the best version of yourself in dealing with the challenges?
I think, to me, is to live with intention.
Yeah.
in everything that I do. I think it has a lot to do with how I start my day. It has a lot to do with how I reflect back on what I did, what I do, what I plan to do. But at the same time, also being able to appreciate the present.
Right.
To me, I've set my core values that, and they mark my decisions. They help me live better. And like I said earlier, looking back at different times in my life and
Yeah.
what mattered to me the most helped me identify those core values.
Yeah.
And if you let me, I could dive deeper into what those values are for me and how they help me make decisions, for instance. And I can obviously share more examples on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be really interested in that, as well as kind of diving into, what does your day look like, or what does your week or your month look like, that is that rhythm that you allow yourself to get into, that allows you to live with intention and live in that best version. Because a lot of people are searching for how do you do it, and how do you, because we live in such a crazy world, and how do you find the, calm waters in the rough seas that we live in.
Right. Um, I think I think to try and answer that question and try and make sense for the audience, I
Yeah.
think to me it's like business, but
Yeah.
it's personal. So when we look at business and we try and improve our business, we look at
Yeah.
KPIs, we set KPIs,
Yeah.
and we try and meet every quarter and measure that progress towards those KPIs,
Yeah.
if we ever meet. But having said that, we can also apply the same methodology in our life. So what I do is I set key health indicators. So to
Right.
me, it's very important. And these are driven by values. These are driven by what matters to me. And so
Right.
I set those uh, key health indicators, and I try and measure my progress every day towards the end of the month. Looking
Right.
at, for instance, um, to give more example, like more specific of that really, what that really means. Like, well, what is KHI, right? What
Yeah.
does that
Yeah.
really mean? So, attending yoga daily, for instance.
Yeah.
Yoga is important to my practice, and it doesn't have to be an hour and a half power
Yeah.
vinyasa, or it doesn't have to
Yeah.
be, it could be 10 minutes, it could be 20 minutes. Meditating in the morning and the evenings, reflecting on the day, looking at what do I feel grateful for today, and
Yeah.
things like that.
Mm.
Um, these are matrices where I keep an eye on,
Yeah.
and when they lessen over time, if I feel like I'm not really working towards them, I can feel a difference. I can
Right.
feel a difference in my body. I can feel a difference in the
Yeah.
way I approach life, and how I react to situations. Than being in the present and being more
Yeah.
like, at rest or at calm
Yeah.
in the midst of all that chaos. Yeah.
So would you say that this lifestyle that you've kind of
Yeah.
explained had started before you got into your 20s, or while you were in your 20s? Where did you really begin to find that you needed to have this sort of rhythm in your life that could keep your balance?
Well, I've always been keen to uh, work in sports and like be active. I've always been active
Yeah.
all my life.
Yeah.
I've always been around sports. And when I was in my early teens, I was in Kung Fu. After that, I got into kickboxing. After that, I got into some running,
Yeah.
swimming, and the list goes on. And I always been like happy to be active. Um, and I think that portrayed and helped me see the world differently.
Right.
I think um, sports and obviously in general helps,
Yeah.
but it wasn't just the sports in a sense of like being active And so being positive all the time, that's not what I really mean.
Yeah.
But it helped strengthen my mind. It helped help me tackle events differently, help me increase my endurance, not just in an athletic perspective, but
Right.
also, at work, in life. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I started sports when I was very young. So, and that stayed with me along the
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
But what grew with that was my reflection on events and my
Mm.
reflection on my narrative,
Mm.
and how do I want to, the questions I asked myself at the very beginning of our session: who am I, where I am,
Yeah.
and where I need to be. And so that was
Mm.
always in my mind. Who am
Mm.
I? How do I
Yeah.
want to show up? Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
What you touched on something that I'm so interested in, and something that I talk to people about too, and that is how we craft our personal narrative and how important it is that we do that. Can you speak on that? Because I don't hear a lot of people talk about their own personal narrative, and really taking, kind of taking the pen to the paper and writing it yourself, because we get so influenced by other things.
That's very true, and I completely agree. I
Mm.
think if we don't take the time to write or even think about our
Yeah.
narrative
Yeah.
deeply enough, it will
Mm.
it will be shaped by other events
Mm-hmm.
that we will then regret not really doing it in the first
Exactly.
place.
Yeah.
So it's going to be written anyway. So whether we want to
Right.
write it or someone else wants to write it for us.
Yeah.
And so it's very important to me to look at events and understand them on a deep level. And narratives are like screenplay. It's scenes.
Mm. Yep.
Um, I remember going back in years when, in my early childhood, and thinking about my time with my parents, and
Yeah.
because frankly speaking, that's the very first time most of us, if not all,
Mm.
learn what love relationship look like.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Most of us learn from our parents or our caregivers. We
Yeah.
learn what that looked like, and that shapes a lot of our future. That shapes a lot of how we see the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah.
Um, so understanding that can be such a pivoting point in
Mm.
our lives, but
Mm.
not only childhood, but also teenage and our adulthood.
Yeah.
There's a lot of events that happen. Sometimes we think of them in such way, that one, A, may be completely false,
Yeah.
and just that's what we felt at the time, but really it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't like that.
Mm.
B, it was maybe half the truth, and
Yeah.
maybe there is more to the story that we need to understand. And
Yeah.
but and C, maybe it was true, but then you had to get it out on paper, and you had
Yeah.
to get it out of your chest, so that
Yeah. Mm.
that's what led to who you are today
Yeah.
in many ways.
Yeah.
So I try and play that screenplay writer, if you will, of my own movie, um, just to learn more and reflect on my past. Um, and and I'm not saying to go in events where you were traumatized, and
Yeah.
then just try and bring all that back, but rather understand really what happened
Yeah.
in a very, maybe start with an abstract, but then if you feel like you want to see more of it, you can then
Yeah.
do that.
It's such a great way to capture, like, and to kind of under a microscope, I would say, the limiting beliefs that we have. I know for myself, I can often play in my mind that because I feel like I'm quite a high achiever, that if I don't achieve, then I failed. And it's something that I do, as I do consistently look back. I like how you say that you're just the screenwriter of your own movie. And I do look back, and I do spend the time to reframe that thinking in my mind, that it wasn't a failure, that it was something that I was learning. And so with that, I'm going to actually ask you, I don't like the word failure, but can you think of a time in your life that failure or things didn't work out and that you did learn something from that? Because I often feel that our identity and who we are comes from those places where life challenges us when we're not in our best, and it's in those places that we see really big growth.
Oh yeah, well, big time. I think if I look back, and I look recently,
Mm,
um, I was in a place where, and I'm talking about my trip here to the country, to New Zealand.
yeah.
I was quite challenged by the environment at my
Mm,
very first work environment.
yeah.
Um, and being in that environment under visa sponsorship and all that, which
Yeah.
everybody goes through,
Yeah.
and it's life part of it.
Mm,
And there's a bit of limitation to it that you can only work for a certain employer
yeah.
given certain circumstances.
Yeah.
And I'm not here to talk bad about anyone really in that perspective, but really to bring this idea home, because that
Yeah.
brought a lot of um a
Mm,
lot of clarity in my head.
yeah.
As I say, I'm constantly looking to grow, and I'm constantly looking to understand my situation,
Mm,
but also my past and how it shaped my present.
yeah.
Um, um, the working environment was not aligned with my own values,
Mm,
and I think
yeah.
there's a lot of people that would work for an employer, whether it's for money or for career progress,
Yeah.
this or that, or even visa, not able to move between jobs.
Yeah.
And they may not really take a chance like this and really look deeper on how that is
Mm,
lining up with your own values.
yeah.
And to me, it was very clear that we reached a point where
Mm,
values were not met.
yeah.
My criteria, my own
Yeah.
values that feeds who I really am was not clearly met, and it was passing that borderline. And
Mm,
to me, it was a clear cut. It didn't take me a very long time to make a decision. Some
yeah.
people would say, how do we make decisions? And it's simple as knowing who we are and what matters to us.
Yeah.
Um, and so I resigned because to me it's important to not do harm or be harmed. So
Yeah.
I'm not here. I honestly, genuinely believe that I'm not here to harm anyone, but at the same time, I don't want to feel like I'm being harmed in the
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
Um, so when I resigned, it was such a it
Mm,
was such a great time, even though
mm,
I was a low point in my in that period, because I
yeah.
had I had little to no money at the time because I was changing jobs. I was not earning as regular. So I was
Mm,
waiting for that transition, and that
yeah.
took about 3, 4 months.
Gosh.
So I was spending from my savings,
Yeah.
so it wasn't really a great ideal. So we could call that failure, or we could call that it was a challenging time,
Yeah.
right? But I called it was clarity time,
Right.
because to me, it brought so much into
Yeah.
my life,
Hmm.
knowing that I've taken a very rough decision. I
Yeah.
could have not found a job, and I could have gone back
Mm,
home or gone somewhere else.
yeah. Mm,
But I took that risk anyway,
yeah.
knowing that I'm doing it for my own self.
Mm,
Um, so
yeah.
yeah,
I love what you said there about how, you realize that your values weren't aligned. And, you know, I talk a lot about people, finding your values as living the best version of yourself. And a lot of times it becomes an exercise to do, an activity to do, to write down your values. But what you said is that no, it's actually using those values to ensure that, like, the energy that you feel in your life continues to flow through you. And then being brave enough to say, no, I'm not going to stay in this situation. And I really like how you talked about how the clarity came. It wasn't failure, it was a challenge, but in these times, it is the times that we really can find our clarity. I really like that. When I introduced you, it was mentioned that you live your life to help people with finding their safety, stability, and security. Why are those three important to you? Safety, stability, and security. And how does that manifest in your life right now?
It does manifest in many ways. Well, I'm a security consultant and auditor by profession, so a lot of my consulting practice and auditing practice would line up to keep the organization and the people safe, and the
Right.
information of people safe and secure. And so there is an element of that, but there's also another element to safety when it comes to living life,
Yeah.
from my own learning, sharing with others. So I do that through writing. So I write blogs
Yeah.
from time to time, not very regular, but when I get enlightened by
Yeah.
an idea, something that mattered to me, and not like everyday writing,
Yeah.
if you will, that may that helped me shape who I am today.
Yeah.
I then use that as a narrative to share with others so they can live their life with more stability, security, and safety. So they can find their own narrative that might be relevant to them,
Right.
and take whatever there is from that story and use it. Also writing a book, that was also the theme behind it. If someone is embarking on a new journey, then they can use that as a tool to help
Yeah.
them find stability, safety, and security while doing their very new or their very next event or this or that.
I love how
Yeah.
those line up exactly. And in the show notes below here, the video, I'll share the link of your blog and share the link of also the book that you wrote, and which is fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah. So how was that, writing and publishing a book? It's a big feat, huh?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's my very first book,
Yeah.
uh, which is out, so that's great.
Yeah.
Um,
I
there's
think
a
there's
lot to
a
be
book in
grateful for.
everyone, and once the first book comes, then more will come. Yeah.
I think so. I think
Yeah.
so. I started writing even more after that came out. Uh,
Yeah.
Even personal diaries and personal journeys, I started writing.
Yeah.
And, it was just
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. It's funny because I find writing very difficult, and because sometimes you can't get that word out, but it's the whole or the thoughts out the way you want. But when it happens, it's really good. We're already running out of time. We always do. And so I always say, well, we'll just have to get you back on and have another chat in a few months. But
yeah.
I want to ask you just a couple of questions. And that is, if you could say that, what is your why and how do you live that? What would come to your mind right now with that question?
Honesty.
Honesty, I like that.
Yeah, be honest with yourself.
Yeah,
Being honest with myself is key. Yeah.
yeah, that's cool. And I'll finish with our last question is I always like to know, what is your favorite quote and why is it? And if you have more than one, that's okay too, because most people have more than one.
Sure. I like to take one of Rumi's quote,
Yeah,
Jalaluddin Rumi, the
yeah,
Persian poet.
yeah,
Um, Jalaluddin Rumi had an incredible life, and I'm sure a lot of us can resonate with it in many ways.
yeah.
And one of his quotes has been teaching me a lot, and
Mm,
it goes with that. So I might be paraphrasing, but forgive me if it's not exactly as
yeah,
you would read it later. but it says something to that effect. Our task is not to find love. Our task is to find the barriers between us and love.
Wow. That's pretty powerful.
It is powerful.
Yeah.
It is powerful. And what it really essentially means is love is within us.
Yeah.
We just need to find it.
Yeah.
Not in the world, not in the material space, but within us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is so cool. Do you have a favorite book that you like to read? Is there yeah.
A favorite book in any subject?
Yeah, I'd be
Okay.
interested. I like to read a lot, so I always like to find what people are reading. Or is there a recent book that you've read that you've liked? Or
Yeah, I'm quite interested in the tales of the Methnawi.
oh,
Um,
I haven't heard.
and these are like Rumi's Methnawi. These are like
Ah,
24,000 verses.
gosh.
Different tales around wisdom and
Right.
living. But if I would also share another book
Yeah.
on the spiritual space, I
Yeah.
think a few books that I came across by Eckhart Tolle is
Mm.
is a spiritual seeker,
Yeah.
and he now lives in Vancouver. He's originally from Germany.
Yeah.
Um, and he's such an enlightened heart in that way,
Right.
and not tied to particular sect or religion or
Yeah.
or group of people anyway like that.
Mm.
And I've read a few of his books now. I've read so obviously there's The Power of Now. There's Oneness with All,
I
and
haven't
there
heard.
is Stillness Speaks. Um,
No.
yeah, like Stillness Speaks, for instance, would help you appreciate nature on a very deep level.
Mm.
Oneness with All would help understand that we're essentially all coming from
One.
one source in one
Yeah.
way or another.
Yeah. Yeah.
And with that, there's a lot of gratitude that comes from it as an outcome of that realization.
Mm.
Appreciating anything and everything that we see around us and being more present,
Yeah.
and essentially lessening all the suffering, all the
Mm.
stories that plays in our head.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gosh. I'm gonna look those books up. I haven't read those, so I'm going to have to grab those as well. Well, Omar, thank you so much for this conversation. It always ends too soon, but I look forward to our next one. And thank you for sharing your insights and being vulnerable in what you have shared and inspiring us to live intentionally and to find those spaces where we can live in the best version of who we are. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
thank you, Lauren. Thanks for inviting me. Appreciate
Yeah.
it.